This interview has been conducted for St John Scotland, 75 Years of Making a Difference. My name is Dr Sue Morrison and the respondent is Gordon Casely. This is May the 11th, 2021, and the interview is taking place in Torfecken. Thank you very much for agreeing to be interviewed for this project, Gordon.
You're very welcome.
For the record, would you please confirm your full name?
Yes, I am Gordon Casely, but the full name on a Sunday is Frederick Gordon Paulson Casely.
What is your age or just your year of birth?
I'm 77, about to become 78. I was born in 1943.
Where were you brought up, Gordon?
Initially in Glasgow, because the war took my parents there, but I've lived my professional life. I consider myself an Aberdonian, both by usage and by family lines. The family goes back to Aberdeen and round about.
And you live there now?
I do, 12 miles outside, on the way to Balmoral, if I dare drop a place name.
Would you please tell me about your early family life?
I come from a very happy family, the eldest of three brothers. My father was a policeman, retired as a superintendent, mother a nurse, and I went into journalism. My younger brother went into banking and business. Youngest brother went into civil engineering. We're a disparate lot, and we've all moved away, but we've all returned to East Coast roots.
Was your family religious at all?
Yes, raised in the... I spent my early boyhood in post-war Hamburg. The Church of Scotland was very strong there, and this continued back when we returned to Scotland. And I try to maintain my Christian ideals.
Thank you. What are your first memories of St John Scotland?
I had none until... I'd rarely even heard of the order until late '66 when I began to become involved in mountain rescue, then a very nascent business in Aberdeen. And concurrently, I met a great historian, Fenton Wyness, who later became a knight of the order, and he introduced me to heraldry. So I was seeing the order in mountain rescue and in the hills, and in reality through Tony Wyness. And it was a great grounding. He introduced me to all kinds of things. I'd had a latent interest in heraldry, which is nowadays a consuming passion, if not a business. And on the mountain rescue side, I saw action in the hills. It was part of that action. For a then 23-year-old, this was a great life. So the two melded together. The order as such, Tony Wyness, I was his guest at the St John annual investiture, which happened to be in Aberdeen in 1967, now my home city, and that was the first time I saw it. Goodness, it was a marathon in those days. There was a morning service, and then a formal lunch, and then the investiture in the afternoon. 2 years previously, the long day had concluded with a ball. Quite unimaginable nowadays. We're far more civilized. You really had to have some measure of endurance to last that day. So that very first service was in Aberdeen in the Mither Kirk, the St Nicholas Kirk, 1967, and by happy coincidence, in 2017 we went back there 50 years later.
I'm a complete ignorant. Could you please explain the chivalric background of St John Scotland?
Oh, it's an absolute puzzle. To this question, Sue, there is no yes or no or one-word answer. Most unusually, we are a charity, of course, but we're also an order of chivalry, going back to, some say, as far back as 1099, but certainly our roots could be traced back to some measure there. And we continued the medieval practice of caring for the sick into the modern times through all kinds of vicissitudes, some of which of course happened not far from the very spot where we're sitting. And the order was revived in England in Victoria's reign in the 1880s. In Scotland it didn't come about until 1947. So I'm looking to the year 2022 as being quite important. 75 years, 3/4 of a century of restoration of the order here in Scotland.
Could you explain how people become a member of St John's Scotland?
That is also not a yes or no answer. There is no box to tick or send it off. You simply have somehow to become acquainted with the order through members and their work, and then become involved in the order. So there was no person, or there was no door through which I walked and became a member of the order. Having met Mountain Rescue in one hand and Fenton Winus in the other, did give me an entree into the order, double-edged. And then when Tony Winus was made a knight, he asked two of us, young friends, great idea, bring them in young. I would be about 24, two esquires to his knight, and that's how I got involved on the chivalric side of the order. So, and the Mountain Rescue continued, principally as a journalist reporting on their events and helping to maintain their profile.
If we take the mountaineering first, could you tell me how that worked with St John's Scotland's involvement?
Yes, it was peculiarly an Aberdeen involvement. Pioneers had thought of Mountain Rescue, which back in the 1960s was still the local bobby and a couple of gamekeepers. It was that kind of thing. Bill Marshall, a great mountaineer and who became a member of the order, was my mentor in Mountain Rescue, and who got me involved in it. He was looking around for funding. They were desperately poor. They were providing all their own gear and equipment. And Tony Winus got involved as well and brought the order's focus in Aberdeen onto Mountain Rescue. So it was a meeting of minds, a meeting of charitable minds, a meeting of active money-raising minds, and it really was a welcome collision. And out of Aberdeen's pioneering efforts, St John's Scotland today is a serious backer of more than 24 mountain rescue teams in funding headquarters for them and vehicles and equipment. We're talking big money. When 15 years ago Aberdeen Mountain Rescue Team had a base set up, opened by the Duke of Gloucester, the cost then was £250,000 for a fairly basic setup. So it's no small beer nowadays, a major business. So is the order chivalric? Is it charitable? Is it a business? And my view would be it has to be a measure of all three, and based on Christian principles.
Some of the other activities that St John's involved with mainly focus on fundraising, but they also spend money as they do with mountaineering. Could you kind of talk me through some of the other activities that they fund?
Well, the fundraising goes on all over St John's, Scotland. Yes, that's part of it. We have patient transport, which Galloway led the way there, followed by Dundee. We have first responder, which exists in a number of pilot areas. We used to be in care homes, but the legalities there became too difficult to handle. Generally speaking, the order, for all its antiquity, has a constant eye on the future. What is the next developing area where we as the order can be of assistance or help or aid?
What do you see as being the next steps for St John's Scotland in that regard?
I think we have to take perhaps a wider look, Sue, and say and take next steps as being not so much the businesses we are in or the help we're in. Keep that going, consolidate it, set up the basis so that it continues to run. But we have to look at the younger generation. None of us, few of your interviewees will be young people, I'm guessing. I would like to see young faces on camera and on sound. We have to bring in youngsters and have to bring them through, recruit them, bring them in, bring them on, because they will be the St John of the future.
There is a problem in recruiting young people. Do you have any ideas of how that might be achieved?
I'm not sure how it can be achieved, I'm sorry to say. I think I know some of the handicaps. Young people nowadays have far more responsibilities. There are more owners' burdens put on them. Getting onto the property ladder, for example, for a young couple is not easy, and so I think that youngsters are burdened with far more difficulties that in a way I wasn't. I think of my own son and his family, and he's well set up in employment, but he didn't get there without quite a struggle. And most youngsters face this. Male, female, boys, girls. Look at the time that study takes and then gaining a foot in the career ladder. And so it makes our job in St. John to recruit all the more necessary. If I have a criticism of the order, it's not so much harsh words about the order, but I think we have to be more open and more constructive and readier to bend the rules, possibly to lower the bar to getting in, not create quite so many hurdles, bring them in at a young age, make sure that the oblation, the annual membership fee, if you like, is not too high. And if they stay only at the first rung of promotion, then so be it. But at least they're in, and they can see for themselves what the order is. They may decide to leave, they may decide to be just sleeping members for the rest of their lives, or they may decide to do something for the order, as it's been my good fortune to do.
Would you explain the structure of the order for me?
That again is not a question that can be answered with a simple yes or no or 1, 2, 3 steps. The chivalric side of the order is headed by our prior and his team, but it's also linked into the executive side of the order. So we have a prior who is effectively the chairman. We have a chief executive officer who is effectively managing director, and they are assisted by a board who comprise professionals in business or who have some string to their bow that can aid the order, which might be in marketing or marketing particularly, or in finance or in charitable work. But whatever they do, they bring some kind of talent. 1998, a long time ago now, I was brought on to the chapter, as we referred to the board in those days, and I was on chapter for some 18 years. So it was a good time, and I didn't think twice of devoting my time to the order. To me, it was one of those social responsibilities you take on in addition to your career, and I greatly liked it.
So below the board, what are the different kind of ranks below that?
If we take the executive side out, then we have our chief executive, our executive director, and he has a small staff, a key staff. So they are they are the paid officials, you might say, of the organisation. They ensure that the organisation's run, that the bills are paid, that we have a roof over our heads. They do a great deal more. In fact, I'm slightly belittling them, and I don't mean to do that. On the chivalric side, we have a system of rank. One joins as a member, moving up to officer, commander, knight, bailiff Grand Cross, or Knight Grand Cross. Think of the Order of the British Empire, another chivalric order. They have member, officer, commander, knight, in exactly the same fashion. People are recognised for their work, their contribution to the community, or to the order itself. And so we have the same kind of ranking. It's celebrated by an annual festival, the church service, the investiture, the lunch, the social gathering. We are a confraternity, and I've used that word to include a sisterhood too, because I welcome ladies. I've worked as a journalist all my life. Equal opportunities, it's been part of my nature. So here we are in a new era with the first lady prior anywhere in the world. And high time too. So it's a joy to see youngsters, both sexes, in amongst us. It's a joy to see people from all over the place. And we are becoming increasingly and properly diverse.
Thank you. You've mentioned a couple of times there the different ceremonies and festivals. Again, I am ignorant in this area. Could you explain some of those activities for me?
On the religious side, you mean?
On the chivalric side?
Yes, which in the meeting of chapter when I was on it, this was before the board came in a couple of years ago, open always with prayers led by the dean, and then we conducted the business, and then we closed with a prayer too. So a chapter meeting went on initially every quarter, but as the business discipline fed through, we met monthly, quite properly too. We also hold an annual festival, which moves around Scotland and is, as mentioned, a religious service, and then the investiture. We also have an annual service here in Torfichan, in this very kirk where we're sitting, which celebrates our roots here geographically and in this beautiful little kirk that's part of the priory. We have the order in Scotland is also split into geographic areas, and about 10 of them. So we cover Scotland geographically, and these normally open with a prayer. They're headed by local people, a local chairman, and his or her cohorts, associates brought in, who may or may not be members of the order. We tend to bring in people who can be useful to us and who themselves have expressed an interest in being involved with the order. So bring them into a local area committee, get them involved, get them enthused and inspired. They speak to their friends and so on. If you're running a social gathering, then you've got a ready-made marketing network. And if you need all hands to the plough, then you've got a few broad shoulders to lean on.
Thank you. That helps me clear my head a wee bit.
I have to say, it's pleasantly difficult to sum up the work of the order being put on the spot, because I've been involved in the order now for nearly 60 years. And so it becomes almost second nature, and you forget actually how the order works and so on. It just becomes part of your life.
What is your role involved doing?
My roles are all past. I deliberately retired in 2015. I didn't want to be occupying dead men's shoes. Important to have make room for others. And I reached the position of Director of Ceremonies. In fact, I'm sitting in the very seat of the Director of Ceremonies here in this kirk. And so it was my job to plan the annual ceremony of the investiture and the service held here. Director of Ceremonies is involved in creating and running great occasions when, say, a new prior is installed every 6 years. And having risen up on various tasks, I found the job of Director of Ceremonies enthralling, very demanding, and there was always a huge sigh of relief breathed when the day had concluded, and usually successfully. What happens if a mistake was made? Well, do it well, do it with dignity, and nobody noticed. Well, would it help you if I gave you a little bit of background?
Yes.
As a journalist, Sue, I've moved around Scotland, working in Edinburgh, Glasgow, Dundee, Aberdeen, and London. So I've been involved with St John in Glasgow principally in my earlier life, and then Aberdeen throughout most of my life, to begin and to conclude. And so working with the area committee was always interesting. And then in 1998 came the call, would I serve on chapter additionally? And that was both an honour and an onerous task, but not one that anyone would wish to shirk. You meet some very interesting people and you get another glimpse of life. I'm old enough now to think back to 1967, my first ever St. John Festival, and know that in those days it was top drawer, it was old family, it was slightly stuffy, but the order has itself modernised. It hasn't had modernisation thrust upon it. It has done so from the inside out. You've only to look at today's office staff who run the executive side to realise who we are, a very modern 21st century organisation with a substantial balance sheet. And you compare it to on the chivalric side and see the welcome new blood that comes in. This is not to knock old family in the slightest. Our new prior, Eleanor, Duchess of Argyll, is a delightful addition. We make her most welcome, and she is the head of the order. She will sit and chair board meetings now. She will have a lot of work on her hands, but it's delightful to have someone like her with her own business background on board.
The average age of members is kind of on the older side.
There's no need to be polite. You've only to look at my colour of hair. I'll be 78 next birthday. Yes, it's a worrying factor, and I've always been a modernist. I delight in the 21st century. We have to get youngsters in. My own recruitment has almost inevitably been among my own peer group. Therefore, when I was a youngster, I brought in youngsters. Now that I am the age I am, those whom I've brought in recent years tend to be pretty antiquated too. Somehow the order has to surmount this. I'm now speaking as an oldie who doesn't know the modern methods. We have to adapt and develop ourselves to know how to hook and bring in the youngsters, albeit they face the obstacles and handicaps I outlined earlier.
You've mentioned a few times that during services there are prayers. Do people have to be practicing Christians to be part of St. John Scotland?
If you look at our statute, we are a Christian order of chivalry. However, we will admit anyone who acknowledges our statutes. Therefore, we could take on board an agnostic or atheist who nevertheless would agree to work and abide by the principles of St. John Scotland. Also, our statutes don't preclude someone from another faith entirely.
Then that is a positive.
Oh, very much a positive. Absolutely. Again, so we come back to the fact this is the 21st century. It's a very different life from old days.
One thing that is lacking from St. John Scotland membership is diversity in relation to colour. Do you think it would be possible to bring people in of colour?
Why not? We've only to look at the political spectrum. We have all colours here. So I don't quite know what's stopped us in our infusion. But then I come back to this business of egalitarianism. People come through on merit. And so I'm more interested in the person. Such as you. You're interviewing me right now. It's good to meet a professional. I wouldn't care what colour or origin you were. You're a professional, and therefore this is why to conduct the interview so professionally.
Could you kind of tell me some stories about your involvement with St John Scotland? What kind of sticks in your mind when you think back?
As a youngster, I was almost overawed. I was also enthralled by the pageantry, the procession, or this procession of the great and the good, almost always old men. Well, they appeared to me to be very old, but then I was just 22 or 23, and nowadays how diverse that same procession is. Not enough youngsters, not enough women, not enough people of colour, if that matters. But in background, we are now all so different. We have occupations and trades which would never have existed in the old days. And we do, I think, reflect 21st century Scotland in our membership. That's no reason to sit back, however. We really have to work on and try to widen, broaden and deepen the membership. Were you about to ask me what could go wrong on a great day? Well, an investiture is a formal ceremony when you hope, you pray that all will go well. And of course, as Director of Ceremonies, in my latter years, it was incumbent on me to see that the whole thing went well. Whatever went wrong in my reign as Director of Ceremonies, I can't remember. But I do remember on one occasion in Dunfermline on the St John service, we were set up with a collection and there should have been 4 of us aside of the communion table ready to go off with the offering plates. Instead of ending up 4 aside, we ended up 5 and 3. And the guilty party next to me whispered, "What do I do?" My answer was, "Wait until the organ strikes up and we disperse to our various pews and just move off. Nobody will notice you. If you're going to make a mistake, do it with dignity and do it well. The congregation never notices." But I can't think of any real bloopers, thank the Lord, that have ever occurred.
What's been your favourite event?
Oh, without doubt, the investiture in Aberdeen 2017, 50 years after the previous event in that very same church. We had 3 cracking hymns, real foot thumpers, a magnificent medieval church, a wonderful organist, and the very first appearance of the St John Choir under Professor Paul Mealer from Aberdeen University. A wonderful occasion. We had, as a religious event, it was uplifting, but as a piece of music and singing, it was a festival all of its own.
This past year has been challenging for most people in Scotland and throughout the world. Do you think that St John Scotland as an organisation has suffered?
I can't think offhand, Sue, of any organisation which hasn't suffered in some way. The basic business of meeting human beings and socialising. So we have, to that extent, we've suffered. We've suffered no more and no less than any other organisation, and like any other 21st century organisation, we've taken steps. We had to evolve and survive throughout this. We have, I'm glad to say, been users from the start of IT, so that's been a good help. Systems have been in place, so working from home or not meeting has to some extent been able to continue. The business of the day has been able to continue. We'll come out of this with different views, because prior to all this ghastliness of the pestilence, we were committed to a service every year on St John's Day. This year, revolution has struck and the festival will occur in October. Well, this might be a pointer to the future. Do we have to adapt in different ways? It might not be altering the date of the festival of St John, but it might be in different ways of holding the festival, or different venues, different sites, different locations. involving different people. So all of us, not just St. John, have learned and are going to learn from COVID. It's been an awful time to live through, but we are all, at the end of the day, we are going to profit from it.
Some of the people that I've already interviewed have mentioned that they don't think the profile of St John Scotland is what it might be. Do you have any ideas of how it might be raised?
I've spent my life in journalism, Sue, and in public relations, several forays into public relations. What you say is what every organisation says. You know, our profile isn't high enough. How do we expand it? How do we get out there? The curious thing is that every organisation does think this. But in our own case, I think perhaps we could have a higher profile. There's an old cliche we apply to ourselves that we are Scotland's best known secret, best kept secret. But there are nearly 25,000 charities, registered charities in Scotland, of which we are just one. But we're in the top, I think we're in the top 800. We deserve to make ourselves better known. I'm glad to say that we've taken on people like Kaylee Hurst as our communications officer. She's not the first to hold that post, but she's doing a cracking job. And she's backed up by other people of the staff. And so we do lead from the right foot there. We are embracing new technology and trying to get ourselves out there. And the dinosaurs who say, well, I don't have email. Well, they are the dinosaurs. We are getting out there. Slow but sure. When I mention St. John, first question people ask is, oh, what's your website? So, particularly youngsters. In fact, youngsters don't mention it. They simply Google it while you're speaking to them. So, these are the factors we have to take into account. My abilities in public relations are now of the Stone Age. My old discipline has moved on gigantically. The same as the fact that I am a born print journalist. I had my career in print at the best time. Who reads a newspaper nowadays? We newspapermen are a dying breed. So don't let St. John be a dying breed. St. John is adapting in modern times, using the best of IT at its command. And the only way to do that is to have a staff who are tech savvy and who can guide the membership of the present and the membership of the future into recruitment. Does that help to answer your question?
Absolutely. Yes, thank you. Moving forward, what are your hopes for St John Scotland?
I hope that we become better known. I hope that that our age profile drops. We could cheerfully see our age profile drop by 4 decades. Youth is the seed corn of everyone's future. It is particularly ours. I try very hard not to talk of our worthy charity work. For me, I focus on Mountain Rescue because it's bright and attractive and out there and outdoorsy and young. And it does switch on people. There's something about going off into the hills. In the spirit of the ancient knights who looked after the sick, we're going out into the hills in horrible weather and finding the injured or whatever and bringing them back alive. It's a great feeling. And so that kind of thing appeals to the youngsters too. Not everybody wants to go into the hills and get absolutely drooked and frozen, but there are other ways of attracting the youth. I couldn't tell you right now half a dozen different ways to attract youth, but others can, and I look to them to carry that candle forward too.
I think that's all my questions, Gordon. Do you have anything that you would like to add?
I think you've done I think you've gone through a fair amount, for which I'm very glad. You've dragged things out of me, Sue, that I didn't know were lying there, but thank you for it. I'm very grateful to be of some assistance in some way.
Gordon, you've been a delight, an absolute delight. Thank you very much for being interviewed today.
You're very welcome.